Good morning for the people on the East Coast, and good evening, people in Israel. I'm Jonathan Conricus, a senior fellow at FDD, former IDF international spokesperson. I am in Majdal Shams today, as you can see from the geolocation, and we are live. And in a few moments, for the next 20 or so minutes, we're going to discuss the very complex and dynamic situation in southern Syria to try to make sense of what's happening, who's fighting against whom, why it matters locally, regionally and globally, and what the different players, the former state and the current state of Syria, Israel, Turkey, Jordan, and of course the US and France and Lebanon, what it means for all of these players and how it can affect regional stability and politics. We've seen very strong events, atrocities, murder, and real horrible scenes that remind Israelis of October 7 and remind other people of the dark days of ISIS, and perhaps even as horrible as Nazi crimes. We've seen that on video coming from the province of Sueda, the area in southwestern Syria where most of the Druze population lives, and we're going to try to make sense of what's happening and why it matters. And for the purpose of doing that, I have two experts with me today. First, we will be speaking with advocate Anan Khair. He is a social activist and a representative of the Druze community in Israel. He lives in Pki'in, which is in the northern Galilee, in northern Israel, and has a very good handle on the sentiment in the Druze community in Israel, and will be able to shed some light on what this means, what the current situation means for Druze in Israel, and first-hand encounters and experience that he has with relatives and people that he has been speaking with directly from inside Syria. And second, we will be speaking with the founder and president of the Alma Center, Lieutenant Colonel in Reserves Sarit Zehavi. I'm sure many of you know her and have seen her in the past. Sarit, for the last 10 years, she founded and has been leading a research center focused on the security challenges against Israel in the northern arena, so tracking Hezbollah and various jihadi organizations and all of the rest of what's left of the Iranian proxies in Lebanon, and following very closely the situation in Syria, the different proxies that remain, the different jihadi organizations, what the regime forces are doing, and of course how all that fits into one place. So we will be discussing from an Israeli security perspective, from a Druze Israeli and a Druze Syrian perspective, and then we will address it on a regional space and make sense of what all this means in a nutshell. So a little bit about where we are and what you can see behind me. So we're at the most eastern outskirt of Majdal Shams in the Israeli Golan Heights. My back is towards the east, and you can see the buffer zone, the first part of the buffer zone between Israel and Syria. The area that you can see that is burned is a result of fires that were ignited over the last month or so. Beyond the hill that you can see straight ahead of us, beyond that hill, is the Druze city or village of Khader, which has strong family ties with the Druze people who live here in Majdal Shams, and that's a very important part of what's happening. A few hundred yards from here to the north is a point from which more than 1,000 Israeli Druze civilians from various parts of Israel crossed into Syria a few days ago in order to try to link up with their Druze kin, with their family members and their distant relatives, as they were being targeted, persecuted, murdered, and attacked by various groups. Sarit will provide more details into who did what and what the tensions between the different organizations are, and Advocate Anan will speak about the sentiment in the Druze society. So Anan, let's start with you. For those who don't understand the situation that the Druze communities in Syria and in Israel are under, if you could explain from your personal family and relative ties what the Druze in Syria are enduring, what their state of mind is, and what they are the most afraid of at this current time.
Good morning, USA. Good evening from Israel. Thank you for that question. What we've been witnessing in these last 72 hours is ethnic cleansing. People of the regime came into Sueda and into the surrounding villages to kill people just because they are Druze. This reminds us of dark days in history, reminds us of October 7th, and reminds us of the Holocaust. We've seen terrible, absolutely devastating images and pictures. We've seen babies being killed, 3-month-old babies. We've seen women being raped and set on fire. We've seen horrible pictures. I was sent one picture that made me almost, I couldn't even breathe, where a man was held, his hands were tied to the chair. He was burned alive, and then in front of him you can see his family. We've seen elderly people, sheikhs, where they shave their mustaches just like in the Holocaust they used to shave the hair of the Jewish people. It's terrible. I mean, it's absolutely
as a way
terrible.
of humiliating, of course, and trying to instill fear. In terms of first-hand encounters, I know you had a very interesting conversation with the manager of the government hospital in Sueda. Now, just before we get into the details of that, just in terms of distances, so we're in the northeastern part of the Golan Heights. Majdal Shams, on the other side is Khader. Sueda, where the majority of the Druze population lives, is about 70 kilometers that direction, southwest. But it's about at least 3 hours ride from here if you drive on normal roads and if there's no fighting on the way. But we're talking about a sizable distance, and in between lots of Bedouin population and various tribes and factions. So
True.
You had a conversation with the general manager of the hospital. What did he tell you?
Yes, I had conversations with many people. One of the most interesting conversations was with the general manager of the hospital, with Dr. Khatib. I basically tried to contact him to see what they needed in terms of help, what we can help them with. I tried through various people, and then we reached. I had his personal phone number. I contacted him via WhatsApp, and what he told me was absolutely, devastating as well. He told me that these terrorists came in, they murdered people sleeping on beds.
Patients, yeah.
Absolutely patients. They murdered patients. They tried to kill the staff as well. They tried to vandalize everything, machines, electricity. He said that we're at a state where at the hospital we do not have the basic equipment to take care of the patients.
Yeah.
The situation is devastating. He gave me a few examples of what he saw in the hospitals of the patients. I just explained some of them.
Yeah.
So he has like patients being burned, being arms chopped, being thrown off roofs.
Yeah, we've seen that unfortunately on social media, and it's very important in the age of fakes and resurfacing or repurposing of videos of atrocities from other conflicts. It's very important to have verification from someone who is on the ground and has the ability to verify what exactly has happened, and the manager of a hospital, I think, is a good source of information.
I have another source of information, if I may. I have a friend who lives in London. Okay, he's originally from Syria. He's been in London for 11 years, and I've been in touch with him. I met him in London previously. So he came to visit his family a few months ago, and he got stuck in one of the surrounding villages. So I'm in touch with him whenever I can, because they have bad internet, they have no electricity. But he gave me, he gives me evidence, and he tells me what he sees on the ground. He tells me what he feels and what he fears. He told me that in one of the surrounding villages they kidnapped women. They killed the family and kidnapped the women. They don't know where the women are up to this point. They have in one other village, they have bodies on the street that in order to collect the bodies it needs days, because you do not have cars, you do not have the staff to do it, you do not have men in the village. It's devastating.
How big is the Druze population in the Sueda area?
In the Sueda, we're talking about between 500 and 700,000
people.
Yeah.
Which they're centered in one area. They're pretty much, they have their area where they live, agricultural, pretty much secluded and not usually intermixing with the other surroundings. They keep to themselves, and they're usually well protected and defend themselves. But what we saw over the last week or so was that they were attacked by convoys, by various armed factions, and I think we'll go to Sarit, and you being an expert military analyst on jihadi organizations, focusing on jihadi organizations and Iranian proxy organizations that are active along the northern fronts of Israel. We've been doing that for many years. I know it's a complicated situation, very dynamic, but for the sake of people watching, let's try to make sense in who are we talking about. The videos and the atrocities that we've seen perpetrated in Sueda against the Druze, who was behind it, and if you could make an assessment, why now, why all of a sudden, what is the motivation behind it?
Few motivations. I want to start with the map. I think it will give us a sense of what's happening here. And in general, you can see green in my map, these are Sunni areas, and purple in my map, these are the Druze areas.
Right.
And all these dotted are the distinguished between the districts of Syria.
And we're currently here in Majdal Shams.
We're currently here in Majdal Shams. That's Israel, that's the Golan Heights.
Yep.
And where you see this checkered line, this is the buffer zone.
Yep.
That was supposed to be a buffer zone, but actually since the civil war in Syria, everybody were part in here. Al-Qaeda, Hezbollah, Iranian proxies, the Syrian army, Jabhat al-Nusra of al-Jolani. Everybody were here. We entered here only after Assad fell, and established 9 positions over here in order to secure the Golan Heights as a lesson of October 7th. So this is a little bit of the Israeli connection to all of that, and it's important.
And Sueda is all the way
here,
over here.
But as you said, there is a Druze population also over here, closer to our border. By the way, the Druze population in Khader, which you mentioned just across the hill,
on the other side of the hill,
coordinated with Hezbollah during the war.
Right.
So you can see how complicated it is. The Druze of Syria are not completely homogenic with regard to politics, with regard to their positions. They are homogenic with regard to their sectorial affiliation, belongings, etc. But when we speak about, we get it a little bit into politics, we see that there are some different positions in this.
Right.
What is currently happening is that we saw it started from clashes. By the way, clashes that we kind of got used to during the civil war between the different factions in Syria all the time. And this time it was between Druze and Bedouins. By the way, rivalry between Druze and Bedouins in those areas, this goes back centuries ago.
Yes.
Okay? And
so
here
that isn't new.
That isn't new. It is centuries ago, and it is deriving from the fact that in our neighborhood, religion is not just a faith. Religion is it's an ideology. It's who you are. It's
your
what
identity.
You belong. It's your identity. That's it. And if you understand that, you understand the Middle East.
Right.
What happens specifically in those specific events, which are new, we have never seen those kind of atrocities, as you just described, in the past, is 2 things. First, the severeness of those atrocities, and the fact that even though the Druze knew how to defend themselves during the civil war, they are armed. These are armed militias of the Druze here. They couldn't defend themselves once al-Jolani's forces entered into those towns
with
in Sueda.
Tanks and APCs.
With tanks, Israel bombed the tanks, but also with trucks, and they entered into Sueda, into the town. That way they had the access to the hospital, they had the access into the homes. And this is connected to the fact that this time it is connected to the government.
Right.
Even if it's not a direct order from the government, which we don't know, it is definitely supported.
Some type of green light. Green
light, supported, especially supported with regard to ideology. And I think that's the main thing that we should emphasize here. Al-Jolani, Ahmed Shara today, when he's wearing the tie, is all of a sudden Ahmed Shara. But Al-Jolani is his terrorist name. He was the head of Al-Qaeda in Syria for many years. They just switched the names in order to run away from sanctions. HTS. Now, when a few weeks ago, the United States canceled the sanctions against, not only against him, against the HTS, which we clearly don't understand why against the HTS. We don't know, I don't know, whether he wants to establish a state like Saudi Arabia that is holding a traditional Islamic state but having close relationship with the West, or whether this is just a first step before becoming ISIS in particular. in any case, the ideology that al-Jolani and his jihadi militias that massacred the Druze are adhering to is an ideology that view this guy over here and his brothers and sisters on the other side of the border as infidels, which they have.
And us as well, of course.
No, this is different.
We're different?
We are in a better situation than the Druze.
Category.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll get to Israel in a second and how it affects
infidels,
Israel.
they either should be converted to Islam or die.
Right.
That's the only two options.
Yeah.
Christians and Jews can live, but only under Islam.
Right. And I think we should maybe speak about Christians as well, because yesterday reports came out of mass killing of Christians. The head of a parish of one of the communities executed in similar fashion to what describes about what happened to the Druze.
We saw 1,000 soldiers of the official new Syrian army of Ahmed al-Shara al-Jolani that entered into Sueda on uniforms, participated in those atrocities. We saw some of those having the patch here of ISIS.
Of ISIS, indeed.
And that's why I'm saying that this time it's a little bit different, because these people in Sueda suffered for many years from the civil war with cuts of electricity, lack of water, lack of food, all of that. We've seen all of that. Yeah. But what we've seen now, it's a little bit different. And it all started from an internal conflict between the Bedouin tribes and the Druze. Both of them are armed, both of them militias, but once al-Jolani's forces interfered in this,
that tipped the scale.
It became something different.
Right.
I think it was planned.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely an assessment, and I've heard more than once people speak about it. But let's speak now a little bit assess about what this means for Israel. The Golan, which we're looking at, is home to about 42,000 people. Around 20,000 live here in the northern part in 4 different Druze villages. Majdal Shams, where we are now, is the biggest one, but Masadeh and Kinya and Bukata are other Druze communities here in the north. And in the southern part of the Golan, we have most of the Jewish population, and in a city called Katzrin, around 8,000 people, but most of the Jewish villages are here in the south. Now, there's an unfortunate situation here where we have a lot of traditional jihadi activity in the southern part of the Golan, which also happens to be closest to where the Jewish population lives. There is the Rokad River, that is a geographical boundary that distinguishes between the Syrian Golan Heights and northern Jordan. The Yarmouk River flows here, and that distinguishes between northern Jordan, and we'll speak about Jordan in a second, and Israel. Now, think about, let's rewind a few months ago, or half a year ago, when the regime fell. Israel's first move was to immediately establish this buffer zone. As always, Israel was criticized for doing it. It wasn't internationally sanctioned, but Israel didn't wait for international approval and immediately advanced forces here in order to do 2 things, essentially. Create a buffer zone and to send a message. That message of do not come close and we will not tolerate, I think today is probably seen as very much justified, because the same organizations that are active here and active here doing atrocities against Druze, I've seen videos where they say very clearly, we are focusing on the Druze now, but the next target are the Jews in Israel, and that is definitely an intention of them. They speak a lot about Al-Aqsa, of coming to Jerusalem and of marching that way, and they speak about a pledge that Muhammad al-Shara or al-Jolani has of taking them to Jerusalem, and that is part of the raison d'etre and part of what they are rallying around. So maybe if you could assess, how would you categorize the severity of the threat against Israel from this area? What should Israel be prepared to face and deal with? And how ready do you think Israel is to face the threats that we have in this area?
I think there are 2 kinds of threats which are very different from each other. The first one is a direct threat to the people that are living here.
Yep.
As you mentioned, if we will not be in this buffer zone, the jihadi forces of al-Jolani will be there. We said throughout, since Assad regime fell, we can re-establish the buffer zone only once we completely understand that there is somebody to trust on the other side. We cannot trust this man on the other side. He didn't do anything to build this trust except for wearing a tie.
Right.
Okay, that's very clear. And that's why for now we are over there. And this is one of the 2 reasons why we decided to bomb not only the roads to Sueda in order to block the entrance of those forces into Sueda a few days ago, but also to send a message in Damascus.
Right.
And we bombed, which is like, I don't know, 50 miles from here.
No, it's less than 50 miles. It's
40 miles.
50 kilometers.
50 kilometers,
yeah.
60 kilometers, 40 miles. It depends where in Damascus you're looking at.
Yeah.
But it's over here in the map. The bottom line is that what we bombed is the Ministry of Defense of El Jolani, the new Ministry of Defense, and we didn't destroy it completely. It was kind of a message bombing.
Yeah.
The idea was to tell him we are not going to accept what's happening to the Druze here. So actually, it's two threats. One to the community over here with the threat of invasion, just like October 7th happened in the south. And the second is the issue of the Druze here. And how are we connected? As you said, we have Druze population in Israel, which we are committed to them. They are brothers and sisters. We are committed to them to defend their brothers and sisters over here.
And Israel has been pretty consistent in saying from the beginning, do not attack the Druze. If you do, you will...
And yet, I must tell you, it is a dilemma. It is a dilemma of what to do.
Right.
Like, what's the red lines? When do you attack regime targets, or when do you attack just the militias over here? Do you send soldiers, boots on the ground to defend? This is 60 kilometers going through very hostile areas.
Yeah.
What exactly do you do? We are already stretched in 7 fronts here in this war. These are huge questions that Israel is now facing, and eventually, for now, the decision making was around airstrikes against those militias that attack the Druze, and specific targeted strikes to, as I've said, sites in Damascus.
Which, judging by current events, and they're very dynamic, and we always have to be careful about assessment, but judging by current events, with the ceasefire now in place, one could claim that the Israeli countermeasures were effective and that they effectively stopped the forces of Jolani.
I think that we don't know numbers of exactly how many were killed here. There are different numbers thrown to the air.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is, and we feel that if Israel wouldn't interfere here, the outcome would be much worse.
Yeah.
The fact that now we stop the interference and these atrocities may be renewed, maybe they were renewed as we speak, we need to make sure that we can continue to defend them, because as you said, if we will not defend them from the air, they will end up here next to the Israeli border.
Yeah, and very bad things will happen in Sueda, which I want to get your insight on. What you, as a Druze Israeli, as someone who is a social activist in Israel and has strong family connections with the Druze on the Golan, and perhaps even distant family connections in Sueda.
Not distant, close.
Close family connections, even better. So, if you could tell us what do you think that Israel, Arab countries, and the West should be doing when it relates to the situation in Syria?
You know, the Druze situation in the Middle East, following Sykes-Picot and the divisions, is really a tragic one, because we were separated in 4 different countries, and the Druze in Israel cannot communicate, or couldn't previously communicate, with the Druze in Jordan or the Druze in Syria, and obviously not in Lebanon.
Yeah.
But we found ways to do it. So historically speaking, we have family connections. For example, my wife's aunt lives in Syria, lives in Jaramana.
In Jaramana, the outskirts of Damascus.
One of her grandchildren was killed. So it's like family links. How do we feel about it? We feel that the Druze there are our brothers and sisters. We feel that we have to do anything possible, anything that we can. We have no limits whatsoever, as we've seen evidence as well. People, did the impossible. People crossed the border, something which I disagree with, obviously, but they trying to send a message. We cannot allow our brothers and sisters to go through a Holocaust. After the videos and the pictures that we're seeing, and because they have nothing to do against this. If it wasn't for Israel, I think we would have 100,000 people killed, at least, if it wasn't for Israel. It's thanks to the airstrikes and thanks to the messages that the official Israel was sending, that do not come close to the Israeli to the Druze population in Sueda, otherwise we're gonna have to protect them. It's because of that we've only had approximately 1,000 people dying. Now, as she said, we do not have exact numbers because we've seen like bodies are still on the streets.
Right.
But according to the hospital, according to the official hospital, the numbers are at least between 700 and 1,000, and that's not counting people who were killed inside houses that we don't know about.
Right. Right. So you would demand different actions from the world, different actions from the West.
Well, obviously, you know, when it comes, sadly, if it's not free Palestine flags, no one is waking up. No one says anything. If it's not Palestinian riots, no one says anything.
I want to say something.
Yeah.
I want to say. If it was not, I think that the main achievement here of the Israeli operation in Syria last week was the fact that it was brought to international attention.
Right.
Because if we wouldn't interfere, and it doesn't matter how many bombs, if Israel wouldn't have interfered, the Bedouins and the Druze and the Al-Jolani forces would continue to kill each other. The atrocities against the Druze, nobody would have cared, nobody would do anything. Since Israel was involved, now everybody knows what's happening, everybody's attention, and now it is not just a small regional problem, it's a global problem.
And it's interesting to look at the framing of how this was framed in international media. If we looked at the headlines, it started with Israel strikes in Damascus, Israel strikes Syria, Israeli attacks in Syria, and it wasn't Jolani forces massacre Druze and Israel responds, but it was about Israeli actions. And I think I have to agree with what you say, that it is you have to be fortunate in life and to have a good enemy. Usually Palestinians have Israelis as enemies, so they get lots and lots of media pampering and international attention. The Druze, unfortunately, are not, and they were exposed as they are. Moving. Yeah, sure.
You know, I tried to, being a lawyer, I tried to research and to understand why the Bedouins from different areas, we've seen cars coming from Saudi Arabia, you know, shouting, we want to come we're coming to you, Druze and Sueda, we're coming to you. We've seen from all the area. Now, I tried to look, like, why are they doing it? So I tried to read, like, what they're saying on different social medias and to go into live videos. They're saying that we've seen evidence that the Druze are killing children. Now, I went to look at these evidences, being a lawyer, as I said, and they're showing the pictures of the Druze babies that they killed, and they say, no, this is like Bedouin children being killed by the Druze with the help of Big Satan, Israel.
Of Israel.
Yeah, obviously they find the link.
Yeah. So we're seeing part of that complexity, and for those joining us now, in case, or people still watching, if you are, great for still staying on for around 40 minutes or so. We're in Majdal Shams, the easternmost part of the Israeli Golan Heights, looking east towards Khader, on the other side of the border, and discussing the very complex and dynamic situation unfolding in southwestern Syria. A few words to try to wrap this up and to try to understand where we go from now, and we'll have Sarit Zahavi and advocate Anan Kher. They will give their final bottom lines of input. My bottom line is that we're looking at the situation which is historical, ancient rivalries between two different ethnic minorities in Syria, Druze and Bedouin, that for some reason that conflict erupted into a totally different magnitude, and it was supported by government troops from the new regime in Syria, headed by Ahmad al-Jawlani or Ahmad al-Shara or Muhammad al-Jalani. We don't know why. My assessment is that regime feels very certain and very confident about its current leadership. It knows that there is a long line of American and other companies that are willing to and waiting to invest in the economy of the new Syrian state, and probably felt secure enough to say, well, then we can settle an old score that we have against the Druze. That may have been one of the motivations. We've seen Israel intervene, and we can debate whether it was legally justified or whether it was okay to do, but what I think we can establish so far is that Israeli strikes against those convoys of tanks and APCs making their way down from Damascus towards Sueda with thousands of armed jihadi fighters under the banner of ISIS or under the banner of Muhammad al-Jawlani or HTS or any other faction. They were on their way to Sueda to perform acts of atrocities and massacres, and they were stopped by Israeli attacks that kind of halted that advance. Currently, we have a ceasefire. Currently, we have Jordanian, Saudi, Turkish, Israeli, and American and even Lebanese fingers and hands that are part of trying to balance the situation here. For the first day, we have a few hours of a ceasefire, but I would like to go to Sarit, and if you could give me an assessment of where do you think this is going? Do you think that this ceasefire will hold? Do you think that the forces that are loyal to Jolani will indeed pull back? Do you think that the Druze will only focus on defending themselves, or will the Druze try to settle a score with the Bedouins around them, who most likely perpetrated tremendous atrocities against them? And how will it affect Israel?
Well, first to your first question, I do believe that even if we do have a kind of a break now, these conflicts will rise up again. We will see this happening again. It's not the first time. It's the first time that it's that severe, but we've witnessed that in the past decade few times. And in last May, we were very close to the same situation. So I believe it will happen again. I think, if I'm zooming out for a moment, the world is completely locked on having a peace agreement with this handsome guy, Ahmed Shara.
Yeah.
Each player for a different reason. Okay, I understand. But I think that the world should be very careful from running that quickly and should make sure that he is incapable of sending his terrorists to massacre neither the Druze nor the Israelis. That's very, very simple. That's what we have to seek for, because eventually what we've seen is that we cannot get into the minds of our enemies and neighbors. We will not know exactly if he's thinking like that or thinking like that. We should look at his capabilities.
Right.
And if he's capable of doing what we've just seen over there, he's capable of doing that over here, and we should make sure this is not happening and making the right precautions. It can start from new sanctions against the HTS again,
Right.
which is an organization.
Which is an interesting idea, definitely.
I don't know, I think it's obvious.
Yeah.
It can start from giving us legitimacy to stay here as long as what we see is jihadi militias on the other side and not an army that truly believes in our existence over here.
Yeah.
And it could start with him giving some trustees or some kind of measures of how he's going to protect the minorities inside Syria.
If that is the intention. Does he really intend to protect minorities?
In English, well,
Yes.
he's not speaking English, but he's saying that to the camera of Western media, that he wants to take care of all Syrians, as if there is a new nation state named Syria. But let's go with that. If he truly wants to protect all the Syrians, he needs to prove how he's doing that. Until now, we haven't seen a single person who was tried or jailed for the massacre against the Alawites. Let's see what will happen with this time.
Thank you, Sarit. Anan, last words from you, bottom line, in terms of what this means for the Druze community, and do you think that currently the Druze community feels more certain or more at peace with their brothers and sisters in Sueda? And if not, and this is perhaps the most contentious and difficult question, what if it's not? What if this gets worse again? What if there are continued attacks against the Druze minority in Sueda? What do you think that Druze people in Israel will do?
Well, first of all, we feel at ease since last night, since we got the news that Israel gave the green light to defend the Druze, as far as they, given the limits, they can act in this region. But and given that there's a ceasefire, we felt at an ease. In central Sueda, we hear that the ceasefire is still holding, But unfortunately, in the last hours, we feel that we've heard that in the outskirts of Sueda, in the villages, some small groups of Bedouins are still trying to go in.
So we're probably talking about this area, the western outskirts.
And the western outskirts. They're trying to renew these atrocities. I don't know if they succeed. I hope they do not. Now, what do we expect? First of all, we cannot, as we're speaking internationally here, Israel is not responsible for minorities in other countries.
True.
Okay? If it says something about Israel, it says, that it's the most decent nation and the most decent state in the region, because it's defending atrocities. That's it's not their problem, but it's doing it because of the Druze in Israel. But we feel that the world should wake up. I mean, we've had October 7th, the world was silent. Now we have these atrocities in Sueda, the world is silent. I think it's a big wake-up call. We have this wolf in a suit in Syria, who's trying to show that business as usual and trying to say that this conflict will be under control. But I think he's lost control of what's happening. They started with the Alawites, they moved to the Druze, and who knows who's next.
They've attacked Christians as well.
And who knows who's next?
Next.
Everything that's not Muslim, Sunni Muslim, is a target, unfortunately.
Well, with those words, I want to thank you, advocate or attorney Anan Khir, and Lieutenant Colonel in Reserves Sarid Zahavi from the Alma Center. I'm Jonathan Conricus, Senior Fellow at FDD. We are in Majdal Shams. And if you find this content useful, as always, share, comment, send it to others who may not know. And for those who are intellectually curious and want to know what's going on, I think you've gotten a first-hand, pretty good insight at the complex and challenging situation that we have inside Syria and on Israel's borders. And as always, thanks for watching. See you the next time. Shalom.